Who are some potential breakout pitching prospects in 2023? Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On MLB Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on in to Locked On MLB Prospects, your home for all things minor league baseball. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, editor-in-chief of BravesToday.com and freelance baseball writer and podcaster. Thank you for making this your first listen. Every single day, we're probably part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. And today, we're talking about breakout pitching prospects in 2023. A couple of them obvious, we've talked about earlier this week. Mason Miller, Andrew Abbott both made our prospect team of the week on yesterday's show. But I had a couple guys I was watching for this year to see what they did when they got into Pro Ball or when they got into their first full season in Pro Ball. I went out, cross-checked with Baseball America's list, with Baseball Prospectus' list, with MLB Pipeline's list, the Athletics list, and selected 6 guys that I want to talk about in a little more detail. Broke them into groups of 3. And the first group, we're going to call them the Breaking Boys, because it's guys who don't necessarily have amazingly overpowering fastballs, but they kind of live off of pretty good breaking stuff. First guy I want to discuss, Robert Gasser from the Milwaukee Brewers. 2021 second-rounder supplemental out of Houston, was moved last year in the Josh Hader trade, and Bob Gass had an okay year last year, so he got 27 games mixed between High A Fort Wayne, Double A Biloxi, Triple A Nashville. In those games, 3.94 ERA, 137 innings pitched, 172 strikeouts, so 11.3 per 9, to 52 walks, 3.4 per 9, and 11 home runs allowed. It's funny, his nickname's Bob Gass, and he's not what you typically would think of as a super high velocity power guy. He's kind of 50-50 on the fastballs and everything else, and it's kind of a fastball slider profile is what he lives off of. The fastball sits 93 or so. He can reach back and get 95 on it. But the thing about that fastball is it comes in kind of flat. He throws it up in the zone quite a bit, and then he just plays off of that. He has a sweeper, big horizontal moving sweeper, sits in the low 80s. It's easily a plus pitch. I think it's probably the best one of his pitches. A lot of places have it as a 55 or so. I think it's probably a 60 when it's on, when he can command it. Gets I want to say, not quite a foot and a half of break, probably 15, 16 inches of break to it, but a really good pitch. He does have a changeup that he throws. He gets a bunch of movement in the other direction with that, so it's very much a horizontal game. He added a cutter in to try to work against right-handers, and it's something where if you think about being a lefty and throwing a sweeper, you are either throwing at a left-handed batter, trying to get it to end in the strike zone, or you're throwing at the strike zone and letting it come out and hoping they chase it. If it's a right-handed batter, you're pretty limited as far as you have to throw it as a ball out of the hand and have it come back into the zone, or you have to walk that fine line of having it start off as maybe an outside strike and end up inside, but don't hit them with it. So one of the weaknesses sometimes you see of guys who are sweeper heavy, I think that's the second highest platoon split for any individual pitch as far as the opposite handedness. We have a show coming next week where we're going to do a deep dive baseball nerd segment into the sweeper and the pros and cons and how to build an arsenal around it. So stay tuned for that. But he has the cutter to kind of help with that. And you can see in the numbers last year, he had to figure out something else to get righties. Versus left-handed batters, 222, 311, 256. Very good job, and that's over 133 plate appearances. So that's enough to be statistically significant. Of the 11 home runs he gave up, 1 was against a lefty. He got just under 450 plate appearances against righties. 251, 328, 422. It's not that they can completely eliminate the slider, but it's definitely something where he's got to get something else. He has to get the cutter a little bit better to help in that situation. Now, so far on the year in AAA, he's made 2 starts as of Wednesday, 1.93 ERA in 9 1/3 innings, 10 strikeouts, so 9.6 per 9, but the sample size is so small here, 7 walks. So point of emphasis, something to work on, trying to work out the control of that cutter and figure out the balance of that sweeper as far as sweeper against a righty. He did get 24 swinging strikes on his 85 swings in those 2 outings, so you like to see that. But Robert Gasser is somebody that if he can harness that cutter and get that cutter to be an effective pitch there, then you've got a bunch of different directional movements in the arsenal because you have the sweeper one way, you have the changeups kind of like a reverse sweeper going the other, you have the fastball being kind of flat, and then you've got the cutter. So I hope that he figures that out. The other guy that I want to put into this Breaking Boys group is right-hand pitcher Trace Bright, 2022 fifth rounder out of Auburn, drafted by the Orioles, and only got in 4 games last year. Started 1. Auburn went all the way to the College World Series. They played 3 games in Omaha, so a long season for everybody. But 1.86 ERA in 9 2/3 innings with 9 strikeouts to 4 walks, no home runs. So far this year, he's in High A Aberdeen. He started 2 games, 1.13 ERA with 8 innings pitched, 18 strikeouts. So 20.3 per 9. Feels like it's probably not going to hold at that level, but still. 18 strikeouts in 8 innings, 2 walks, no home runs. So the thing with Trace Bright, again, another guy where the fastball is not bad, but it's not like blow you away amazing. It sits low to mid 90s. I think Baseball America called it 92 to 95. In my experience, because I watched him in college as well, it kind of hovers around that 93, 94. He can run it up a little bit, but just gets a lot of vertical break to it. Has a lot of good movement there. And then to go along with it, he's throwing a curveball with tons of spin. Sits in the mid 70s. Just vertical break of something like 20 inches of break on it. So the fastball, tons of ride, stays up. The curveball falls off the table. To go along with it, he's got a slider, sits in the low 80s. He's added some sweep to that since I saw him last in college, but it's still probably the 4th pitch of the 4. He still has to kind of learn to command it and be able to land it for a strike. And then he has a changeup that can run about 1.5 feet to the arm side, sits in the mid 80s. So he's got essentially 4 different velocity bands because he's got low to mid 90s, he's got mid 70s on the curve, he's got low 80s on the slider, and mid 80s on the changeup. Directions: fastball stays up, curveball drops straight down, slider runs one way, changeup goes the other. So 4 directions, 4 velocity bands, a lot of tools that you need to be a very successful major league pitcher. The things he has to work on, he has to get the command for the slider a little better. I do think it's a little bit easier to spot out of the hand. And then the consistency on the changeup. It's gotten better since when he was in college, but it's still not quite where it needs to be for a starter. And he's going to need that as the 3rd pitch. But overall, I love the package of the 4 things that Trace Bright throws because, again, 4 directions, 4 different velocity bands. As long as they tunnel even decently, you're looking at a higher ceiling guy than I think anybody expected when they took him in the 5th round last year. In just a minute, I want to get to a couple of funky lefties who you have to look past their surface stats this season to see the promise. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar. Something exciting is coming to Built.com on April 22nd. I don't have all of the details yet. They sent us kind of a cryptic email, calendar invite, asked us to block aside time. I don't know exactly what it is, but I get the feeling it's something you're not going to want to miss. If you know how Built works, obviously it's the most incredible protein bars in the world. They're 130 calories, 17 grams of protein. They're so good for you. The flavors are fantastic, but they do these limited time, limited quantity flavor drops where they'll do something. I know at St. Patrick's Day, they usually do some sort of like shamrock, almost like a shamrock shake type of bar. So Mark your calendars. Go to built.com on Saturday, April 22nd to be one of the first to discover what this hype is about and what's going on. Use promo code LOCKEDON15 while you're there to get 15% off your order. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. To my everydayers, be looking forward to tomorrow's show. We're talking to our friends from Locked On Astros. We've got Brett on the show. We're talking outfielder Corey Julks. He's been the story of the season for them with the impact he's making early. Can he keep this up? We want to talk about Hunter Brown and how good he's looked in the rotation since Justin Verlander is gone. And then catchers Corey Lee and Yanye Diaz, who's going to be ready to take over from Martin Maldonado. So that's coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. Talking about lefties, I've got a couple funky lefties here, and this is probably a little bit of bias on my part because I just love a funky lefty. But we're going to talk about Cardinals pitcher Cooper Hjerpe, 2022 first rounder out of Oregon State. I believe Baseball America is the one that kind of had him highlighted. And the thing here is everything he does is just so weird and unusual for a hitter to see. If you'll remember back from the draft, Jeff Ellis and I had a disagreement on our draft show when he went in the first round. And Jeff's point was there's never been a starting pitcher in baseball that had a release point as low as Cooper Hjerpe's. And that was a bad thing to him because he said he's destined for relief. And to me, that was a good thing. Because, the release height's 4.5 feet off the ground. It's so incredibly low. And he's throwing from an almost sidearm slot. Like, it's probably 5 or 10 degrees off of horizontal. And so, because of this, one, he gets a ton of extension. He gets like 6.5 foot of extension. He also has a ton of deception. And so, the pure stuff isn't blow you away amazing. It's good. Don't get me wrong. It's good stuff. But it's not like blow you away amazing. But it's just so hard to pick up out of the hand. So 2 games this year, and you're going to have to look past the stats this year to believe in these 2 guys. In Cooper Hjerpe's 2 starts in high A this year, 7 innings pitched, 7 runs given up, 11 strikeouts to 6 walks. But we have a track record from college at Oregon State. He led the country in strikeouts with 163, so 14 strikeouts per 9. He had a 2.53 ERA and 103 1/3 innings. Only gave up 23 walks, so 2 walks per 9 with 3 home runs. So the control has been there. The history of throwing strikes has been there. This is just a little bit of adjustment period to professional baseball. He did not throw after the draft in affiliated ball last year. This is all that he's done. He's in high A Peoria right now. But the fastball itself, 60 grade on it, sits low 90s. He's bumped up from college. He's now sitting 92, 93. Whereas in college, he was kind of sitting 89, 90 or so. He's run it up as high as like 94, 95. And again, with the extension, it plays up on the velocity. So the perceived velocity, how fast you think it is higher than 92, 93, touching 95. His slider is a sweeper. Sits in the high 70s, 78, 79 or so. And again, it's coming out of that weird slot. So it's if you think about it, if he was throwing directly overhead, it would be a vertical breaker. But because he's throwing almost entirely sidearm, it's now a horizontal sweeper. But it's there 78, 79 miles an hour. He's got a changeup that sits in the low 80s. Probably above average or so. It's got a lot of tumble to it, a lot of fade to it. And then he has a curveball that isn't necessarily great. It kind of looks like the slider, but just a little more vertical drop to it than the slider has. So probably not technically 2-plane break, but essentially 2-plane break on it. Definitely something he has to work on. And again, the command's always been really good. So it's just a package of pitchability. He's been good at getting guys out. You see that in the strikeout numbers in college, as well as how weird the visual profile is of this thing coming at you, right? It's just hard to pick up out of the hand. Everything comes from a really low, wide point that you're not used to seeing a ball come from, and then everything moves different directions off of that for the most part. He doesn't really have anything that runs arm side. When you're a sidearm guy, it's really hard to have something run arm side, but he's got things that either it stays up, or it moves, or it sweeps, and drops. Again, a little bit more work to do there as far as, the changeup does have more vertical than horizontal, but you still know nothing's going to end up on the arm side of the ball. It's all going to be somewhere on the glove side. So still love Cooper Hjerpe. Baseball America had him on the list. They think he's going to be the guy that can break out this year. And then the other option, you have to look past his stats this year to believe in him, is Justin Wrobleski of the Dodgers. 2021 11th rounder out of Oklahoma State. Fell so far because he had Tommy John in the spring. Made it back at the end of the year last year to pitch in 13 games. 2.91 ERA in 21 2/3 innings. 26 strikeouts, 10.8 per nine, to 5 walks, 2.1 per nine, 1 home run allowed. I say you have to look past the stats because this year in High A Great Lakes, he started twice. 6.43 ERA in 7 innings, 8 strikeouts to 2 walks and a home run allowed. But another guy, not as funky as Hjerpe, right? Not as low release point side, like not all of that funky stuff, but it is a 3/4 slot that does kind of have a crossfire finish across the body. He keeps the ball in the hand or in the glove an incredibly long time. His hands break at the last second and then the ball's behind his body. And so you see him, his back's almost turned to you, and then all of a sudden he comes and the ball just comes out of nowhere. So the ball shows up late in the movement. Kind of hard to pick it up until you get there. And then the actual stuff that he throws, one, he pounds a ton of strikes, right? He is throwing a ton of strikes. Fastballs above average, sits mid to upper 90s, 95, 96 or so since he added strength after TJ. One of the only real upsides to coming back from Tommy John surgery is so many guys come back significantly stronger because of all of the time you have to do lower body exercises, as well as the rehab work to strengthen everything else to hopefully lower stress on the elbow, as well as optimizing the mechanics on it. So came back throwing harder. He's got the fastball. He's got a vertical breaking slider in the mid 80s, as well as a cutter that he throws in the low 90s. Really like to see what he does. He works really, really quickly. Again, throws a ton of strikes, and it's still a little funky to pick up. He does stand on the far side of the rubber, but it's like the far third base side as a lefty, so it's coming at you from like dead in the plate, and things can run both directions. So interesting combination of tools. Baseball America had him on their write-up as well. I thought it was kind of interesting. Wanted to pass that one along. We're going to be watching more of that while he's in High A Great Lakes. In just a minute, I've got 2 final guys to talk about. These are the power guys. They've got incredibly powerful flame-throwing stuff, and we're going to get to them next. But first, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit, and it's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part has to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay's guaranteed fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check mark to know your part's going to fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. Okay, we got past the guys with the breaking stuff. We got past the funky guys. Let's talk about the power, right? This is what everybody wants to see. The power pitchers. We've got the first one we're going to talk about. I want to say he was in the write-up from MLB Pipeline. Daniel Palencia of the Cubs. I was lucky enough to see him in the start that he had, the first start he had in Double-A. I was there, same game that Owen Casey hit the 3 home runs. But 2020 IFA by the A's, was traded in the Andrew Chafin deal. Got 20 starts in last year, mostly in High A. 3.94 ERA in 75 and a third innings, 98 strikeouts, so 11.7 per nine, to 35 walks, 4.2 per nine, and 7 home runs allowed. In the start that I saw him do for the Smokies against the Montgomery Biscuits, 3 and a third innings, 4 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk, 5 strikeouts. And again, it is a power profile. This fastball, and he's not a huge guy. He's listed at 5'11", 160. He is bigger than that. I'd say probably 6 foot 180, but he's not a massive guy. I'm 6 foot 180. Palencia he's maximizing his physical tools, but the fastball, 80 grade fastball, it routinely just sits 99 miles an hour. I want to say he touched 102. The gun wasn't working in Montgomery, but I was right next to the dugout and they had some stuff and I could kind of overhear them looking at some speeds on I don't know if it was a pocket radar, if it was they were hooked to a TrackMan or something like that, but they were looking at some of the stuff. So touching 102. The slider sits in the low 90s, plus pitch. It's a power slider, vertical break to it. One of those kind of traditional power sliders that you see, or a traditional moving slider, that old school slider, but definitely a power version of it. He can land it for a strike if he needs to. He can get dudes to chase if he needs to. I want to say of those 5 strikeouts, 2 of those came on that slider. He also has a changeup, kind of firm. I think it's maybe average. It's a distant third pitch. And so you're in a situation because of the fact that he hasn't really gone deep into games. I mean, this start was 3 1/3. Yes, it was the first start of the year, but he routinely didn't finish 5 innings in the past, combined with some of the issues he's had with walks in the past. Again, 4.2 walks per 9 last year. And I want to say that was one of the better marks of his career. And Low A Myrtle Beach in 27 innings in 2021, he had 6 walks per 9. So that's an improvement to get to 4.18. A lot of people have him pigeonholed as a reliever. I think he can be a starter. I absolutely do. Now, he's got to work on the depth to the outings. Obviously, that's just, you're going to have to be able to go at least 5 or 6 innings if you want to be a starter. But then I also think he needs to work on the sequencing a bit. It's something where he knows that the fastball is really good, right? And he knows he can get the fastball by you. And so he's really geared up. He can always just fall back to, I'm going to blow this past you. And sometimes he throws fastballs in counts where you don't have to throw a fastball. You can save a bullet. You can throw a slider. You can throw a changeup. You can throw something else. You don't have to always go back to the fastball just because you know it's good, because eventually you're going to get to the point and the level of opposition where they can time that up and they can hit that. So a little bit of work on sequencing, but was very impressed with Daniel Palencia and what I saw. I still think the dream of him being a starter should be alive, and excited to see what he does this year in Double-A. I think it's a good test there in Double-A. The other guy, the Athletic, had some quotes from an anonymous scout on right-hand pitcher Forrest Whitley of the Astros. We're going to get into some of this tomorrow with Brett from Locked On Astros, but quite a story here. 2016 first rounder out of high school, and he has had a long journey, I guess we can put it that way. He's 25 years old. At one point in time, he was the number 1 pitching prospect in this system. He was suspended in 2018 for a banned stimulant. He had lat and oblique injuries in 2018. In 2019, he had shoulder issues. He lost the 2020 season like everybody else did. And so he went from making it all the way to AAA. He had to start back over because when he was coming out of the pandemic, he had to have Tommy John. And so he didn't get back on a mound until later in the year last year, made a start in rookie ball, made 2 starts in Low A, and then went to AAA Sugarland. And the stats weren't great when he made it back last year. In the 13 games total, 11 of those were starts, 6.53 ERA, and 40 innings pitched, 45 strikeouts, so 10.1 per 9, 27 walks, 6.1 per 9, and 2 home runs allowed. The Baseball America write-up on Forrest Whitley is not very confidence-inspiring. They say the hopes of him returning to his previous form are gone. Like it is his time on the 40-man roster is a running clock. He only has one option left. And this is something where it's like they don't know if his stuff's ever going to return or not. And he is 100% at best a reliever. I still think there's a hope that he can be a starting pitcher, maybe a number 4, number 5. The stuff has not come back to the same point it did after the Tommy John, but I still like some of what he can do. He has a sinker that sits 96, 97. He can run it up to almost 100 miles an hour. He has above average slider, kind of looks like a cutter. You know, they kind of blend together sometimes depending on the type of slider you throw. And then you end up with the thing like the Braves had on the screen where it says slutter, like I just said. Above average curveball, and the changeups is kind of average. I do think when you watch the film, the mechanics are a lot calmer. He streamlined the delivery, doesn't look nearly as busy as it used to be. Now, granted, a lot of what I saw, he was working out of the stretch because there were runners on. But still, I think the mechanics are better, provided that he's healthy. Even if the stuff stays as it is and doesn't come back to what his fastball used to look like and what some of his breaking stuff used to look like, I still think you're looking at a useful package because you've got the velocity as far as running up a sinker to 99. You've got a slider in the mid to high 80s. You've got a curveball that's in the upper 70s. Kind of a more of a two-plane break than just a straight vertical break, and then you have a changeup as well. And I think Forrest Whitley can still be a start. He started 2 games in AAA for Sugar Land so far this year. 1.13 ERA in 8 innings, 11 strikeouts, 3 walks, gave up a home run, 31% CSW rate. Call it swings plus whiffs. And the rule of thumb is if you can hit 30%, that's good. So I think that he's still a viable starting pitcher candidate. And I'm hoping at age 25 that this is the year that you see him come back and be that guy, right? Be the guy who can be a starter. Recording this on a Wednesday, I believe he was the starter last night. So so the stats that I have for tonight do not include what he did on Tuesday night. Just kind of what ends up happening when you have to pre-write these and pre-record these and all of that. If you have questions for the show, I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball. Show's on Twitter at Locked On Farm. You can email us, lockedonmlbprospects@gmail.com, or drop your questions in the Locked On MLB Prospects Discord. Links in the episode description, links in the show notes. Till tomorrow's show, remember, it's always a great time to pay a minor leaguer.